Hi everyone, I'm Vladyslav Novikov, and joining me again is Andriy Dobriansky, Director of Communication at the Ukrainian Congress Committee of America. Andriy, hello.
Hi, thanks for having me back on.
So let's start. Did Zelensky talks with Witkov and Kushner fail? What's your take?
I think right now there is a very coordinated message coming from Ukraine's team, and that goes through their entire diplomatic corpus of hold on, nobody, nobody start making pronouncements about territories, about NATO, about anything until you hear it directly from President Zelensky. In fact, a lot of the reporters who seem to be saying more things out there online are people who are not talking directly with Zelensky's team. So I know from the side of the Americans, they were very coordinated on what they wanted to have. They crafted a narrative that was from Witkoff and Kushner on down, and they crafted a narrative that this is about traveling to Berlin only if there's a peace deal to be signed, as if a document existed. And we know there's drafts going around. There's not one single document, and also it made it sound like President Zelensky or the Ukrainian people were the ones holding up peace. This was the narrative coming out from the White House. What Ukraine has done is been very diplomatic. They have put out very supportive messages about Witkoff and Kushner, making sure that people understand that they are having a dialogue. They don't want to talk about what's in the dialogue until the final press conference. So there's two competing narratives, and I think Ukraine actually did a very good job here in America this weekend, where they had the Ukrainian ambassador to the USA on numerous news networks doing exactly what I just said, saying that there's nothing signed yet. We're not talking about territories. We're not doing that until we hear the final agreement.
hmm I mean, it feels like Zelensky didn't really have a real choice. Almost like the Americans said, here are two options.
Yeah.
One written big letters, the other small ones.
Yeah.
But in the end, what new thing could they really offer him?
Well, I think Ukraine also came into these meetings in a very good position. What happened in Kupiansk is a very solid counter narrative to what Witkoff and Kushner and other people in the American circle has been talking, which is Ukraine, you have to sign because otherwise you're losing so much. Well, if Ukraine is losing so much, why are the territories that Russia says it controls not being controlled by Russia? And that's something that they have to explain. And the other person who's not being talked about is the fact that the NATO Supreme Allied Commander, the commander of European Command for the USA, General Grinkevich, is in the room as well. This is a person that has been coordinating with Ukraine since he took over from the previous general. So he just started this year, but he's been coordinating with Ukrainians in terms of strikes on Russian territory. It's his authority that gives Ukraine the information from the satellites about what's a location to strike and what's not. And in fact, in the new defense authorization that Congress is working to pass, a lot of the things that the Secretary of Defense used to authorize now is being put directly onto European Command under the authority of General Grinkevich. So one of the things that's great to be discussed with is you're not just seeing Kushner and Witkoff in the room with President Zelensky and Chancellor Merz. You're also seeing Ukraine's military and intelligence people in the room, and they can actually, with General Grinkevich, talk directly about military to military. If you're talking about security guarantees and territory, let's talk about specifics. And these two gentlemen know the specifics.
Yeah, and one more interesting thing, the media says Zelensky has asked for a draft law on holding election during
Yeah.
material law.
Mhm.
Uh, is that even possible?
Is that from everything I have read and heard, no. However, we're dealing with a United States president that doesn't look at law as something that is just as it's written. There's many things that President Trump has done and said, well, let's see in court what's possible or not. Maybe a judge will have a different interpretation. I think it'll be very difficult because of many reasons. First and foremost, the safety of people in Ukraine, and there has been not a single ceasefire from the Russian side. I think that is the one thing that the Europeans would like to see first and foremost. I think that is one of Merz's lines, one of Rutte's lines. Stubb has mentioned this in a good interview this weekend. They need to see a ceasefire because any kind of procedure of a peace plan would have to include a ceasefire just to get to the beginning points. You can't even delineate what the front line is without having international inspectors to say, oh yes, that is the ceasefire line. We can definitively say this is the gray zone or what have you, or this is the area that's been landmined. There's something that Russians and Ukrainians can say, but without verification, that makes no sense. And that's only going to happen during ceasefire. However, for the population, we know that the increase of attacks, especially on Odessa this weekend, especially on civilian locations and power plants, that has to stop. Otherwise, you're not going to be able to have an election. And the other part of the election is all the millions of people that are currently not in Ukraine. This is a very big issue as part of Ukraine's democracy. We have people with Ukrainian passports way more than we used to have. And I've done election monitoring for almost 20 years now in Ukraine. But I also have my friends here in New York that run that help the consulate run the voting booth here. That is 9 states of Ukrainian population with passports who are able to vote in one consulate. In a country like Poland, you're only allowed to vote in the embassy in Warsaw. That is one location for millions of Ukrainians. So a lot of this is going to have to be worked out before any election to figure out exactly how we're allowing people who are outside the country to vote in a time that goes along with their constitutional rights.
But Zelensky is reportedly ready to drop Ukraine's NATO bid in exchange for security guarantees. And here we go again with these guarantees. Let's be honest, even if someone gives them and Russia attacks again, no one will actually go to war with us, right?
Well, 2 things. One, the Ukrainian team is saying nothing has been, if you read anything about NATO or territory, we haven't made an announcement. So that's number 1, so everybody's clear. Number 2, as far as what is being discussed, Ukraine wants a hard guarantee of a security guarantee, not a Budapest memorandum, not an international agreement of resolution. It has to be something not just signed by other presidents.
But it sounds like the same with
Well,
Budapest.
And one of the big things is that Ukraine doesn't want something just signed by a president, and that's what happened in Budapest memorandum. They want something that's ratified by a Congress in the United States, ratified by parliaments in Europe, that actually has a sense of law. We can forget about Russia because they'll rip up whatever agreement, but it has to be something more than the Budapest memorandum and more than what's happening in Cambodia. There was a peace agreement that President Trump signed, and they're in active war right now. More than what President Trump invited the president of Rwanda and Congo to sign a peace deal. And now we have 200,000 people displaced since that peace agreement in Rwanda. So that's because those were just pieces of paper signed by presidents. Ukraine, number 1, wants it to be ratified by some parliaments as a backer that this is actually law, that you will help Ukraine. And if that's on the level of a NATO agreement, that could be just as good as NATO. We know that Ukraine is going to be integrated more into European security agreements because what's being told very clearly, and this is not just by Rutte, but especially, again, there was a great interview by a German outlet for President Stubb of Finland. Europe is preparing for war with Russia. They have to be prepared for war with Russia. And the only way they prepare is to work with Ukraine, who knows how to defend against Russia.
But maybe this guarantee is just a piece of paper. I mean, or can they actually be ratified by Congress, for example?
Well, 2 of the things that happened this weekend in the United States was, 1, the ambassador from Ukraine was on many different television stations explaining Ukraine's position, because the White House had their position and Ukraine was making sure that American citizens heard on the news in the United States what Ukraine's position is, and she did a very good job. The second thing is she was all over Congress this weekend as well, talking to senators, talking to members of Congress, keeping them abreast. Also, there was a delegation of several members from Ukraine as well, from the parliament as well as several ministries. They were talking directly with members of Congress. They were making sure that when the president is ready to offer something, that Congress understands what is being offered. So they're being kept up to date on the negotiations directly. And secondly, do they have the will to ratify a treaty? That hasn't been done in a very long time in the United States, just to be clear. We have not had international treaties ratified by countries. It has been mostly agreements signed by the president. So this is a very big deal.
Okay. By the way, let's talk about U.S. news. Trump's approval rating keeps falling amid economic problem. That was interesting.
It is. I want to talk about U.S. news. So I was supposed to be on an American news channel this morning to talk about Berlin, and the news channel called me yesterday because they thought that they can't talk about Berlin in the morning because of the shooting that happened in Syria against American service members.
Yeah.
That was yesterday afternoon in America. We had 2 mass shootings in the United States, which were the lead story in the news. What's happening in Berlin is further down the line. So we have a lot of things that are happening. We had the mass shooting in Australia, the mass shooting in a university in the United States, and then a famous director was killed in his home, which has completely taken over the news. I am still going to be appearing on American television today and other channels, but it's very hard to start talking about Ukraine when breaking news like this happens. Now, what you mentioned is you mentioned the discussions that are happening about President's popularity.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things that he just did today was on the day that this film director who has won many awards, when he died, President Trump put out a tweet of his, and he made fun of this director because he didn't vote for him. These are the kind of things that President Trump's voters, the independent voters who said, I'd rather vote for you than Biden because I want a bigger economic policy. Not only are they questioning what's going to happen economically, but they see this stuff where he makes fun of people publicly and they just they don't know what to do anymore. Do they want this kind of president? As far as economically, the president himself had a speech yesterday about it was a Christmas reception at the White House. And during that, he said that he does not see any of his economic policies being a benefit for Americans until maybe a year from now. So this is very similar to what Biden did. Biden lost support for the Democrats because he said, don't worry about inflation. We have policies and things will be better in a while for you. And that is hurting President Trump politically because everything he's doing is raising prices. And he's promising that in a year from now, things will be better. Americans don't have time to wait because the job market is getting worse and worse because of his tariffs. And it's a situation that we will see at the polls because there will be midterm elections next year.
All this news about mass shooting and killing, I mean, it's very shocked for people in America. Yeah.
Absolutely. I mean, the sad thing is that mass shootings are something that we have unfortunately gotten too used to. It's not something that we have dealt with politically. The last time we passed legislation that was meaningful about weapons was in the 1990s. We have had some further changes. President Biden passed a fairly weak law, but at least it was some kind of law about gun rights. But in the end, we had a major university who had 9 people shot in the United States yesterday. And one of the people that was in the room and saw her friend shot was somebody who was shot as a high schooler when she was 15 years old. She was shot in the chest and she survived. And now she went to university. And at that university, another shooter came and shot up. This happens way too often in the United States. And it is part of the problem that we've had too many people use the issue of gun rights for political gain, but not really invested the time of how to make especially younger people and children safe.
Yeah, this story about killing and mass shooting, it's a really horrible thing. But we have 2 situations. First situation you talk about, it's mass shooting, it's killing. And second situation, we have really same mass shooting from Russia to Ukraine. And It's feel like people just don't shock when they hear about news about Ukraine, but they shock this situation, um, local shooting. I don't know how to say it's right,
Yeah.
and it feel like the world is simply tired of the war.
Yeah.
In Ukraine, Russia carry out attacks like this almost every day, yet they are no screaming headlines or massive media attention anymore.
The problem is both political leadership in the United States. We've had political leaders with our president, vice president, talking about exactly what you said, that Americans are tired. They don't want to hear about this. That's not the case when you do public polling of Americans. Americans want to support Ukraine. Americans understand what's happening in the age of social media, in the age of the internet. There's a lot more information that Americans get. In the last week, many people I saw, many media people and others were sharing the clip of the young boy in Ukraine who was speaking in Europe, and his translator got so emotional talking about what this young boy had to survive. What is happening in terms of what Ukraine is putting out? I just had a dinner with some political friends, and one of them was saying that he just saw the documentary about Avdiivka for the first time, and his eyes were just like, I can't believe this is happening today in this world. So Ukraine is doing a fairly good job about getting the message out there. And even when political leaders like the president and vice president say that Americans are tired, we see in public polling, whether it's what was released by the Ronald Reagan Institute or others that released right after that, Americans are still supporting Ukraine in a very big degree. We will see that again I'm already talking about what we're doing in the United States for the anniversary of the full-fledged invasion. We already have politicians, because it's an election year. In America, we have
Yeah.
politicians from Congress and Senate saying, absolutely, I will speak on the anniversary. We want to stand with the Ukrainian people. And they're not doing that because it's not popular. They're doing that because they understand that the American people are standing with Ukraine. It's just unfortunate that when we see people on television talking about it, a lot of those people are people who don't visit Ukraine, people who don't understand what's happening. And unfortunately, they get priority because of who their status is. But I really wish that we would see more people visit Ukraine. And that's something that Ukraine has been working on. We've had conservative speakers time and again visit Ukraine this year. The pastor Mark Burns from South Carolina, who is somebody who is a religious leader that President Trump likes, he has vowed in the last week that he wants to do even more to raise the status since he's visited Ukraine several times. It's just something that we need to keep working on.
American people, thank you. We hope to you. It's really it's really so. Andriy, thank you for the insights. Great seeing you, and see you next time.
Thank you so much.